The Late Great Planet Earth, Chapter 1. We believe whatever we want to believe. Demosthenes, 348 BC. Chapter 1. Future Tense. It was a perfect night for a party. In the warm California evening, the lemon trees perfumed the patio, and the flickering tiki torches cast shadows over a lavish table. The aroma of steaks sizzling on the barbecue grill was tantalizing, and we were wishing someone would give the signal to eat. To our dismay, we discovered that no one else was outside. We were alone with our appetites. Crushed in a tight circle in the overhead living room were most of the guests, waiting rather impatiently for the fortune teller to read their poems. One by one, they would eagerly hold out their hands, knowing they would hear flatteries, but hoping there would be some half-truth about themselves which would give them a mental uplift, an ego builder to tell the boys at the office or the girls at the bridge table. And so it had been from the beginning of time. People have been obsessed with the desire to know what is going to happen in the future. From kings and rulers to servants and slaves, rich, poor, lowly, and mighty people have called upon wizards, prophets, seers, magicians, the stars and the moon for powers and signs beyond the understanding of the human mind. Astrology originated in ancient Chaldea, in the region around the Persian Gulf. All the proud kings of Chaldea and later Babylon had staff astrologers to advise them concerning the future. The Greek father of historians, Herodotus, speaks of the incredible city of Babylon and mentions the enormous ziggurat form from which the astrologers tracked the stars. The ruins of several of these observatories, called ziggurats, have been uncovered in the area of ancient Babylon by 20th century archaeologists. Obviously, astrologers were VIPs in Babylon. The pharaohs of Egypt imported the knowledge of astrology and magic from Babylon. Some scholars said that the pharaohs constructed certain parts of the pyramids to line up with the stars. The importance or position of a man has nothing to do with his superstitious concerns. Julius Caesar was the greatest of Roman leaders and yet depended upon augurs for prophetic advice. An augur is a soothsayer or fortune teller. In ancient Rome, there was an official high-ranking government group, probably similar to our State Department, which was called the Board of Augurs. The great Roman orator Cicero was a member of this board. However, it has been said that although Cicero took his duties seriously since he was a man of great loyalty to his country, he privately considered some of the augurs' prophecies to be absurd. Caesar depended upon signs in the sky to conduct affairs of the state and rule the almighty Roman Empire. As leader of the people, he set the example for his fellow Romans to become obsessed with horoscopes. Many strange customs have followed in determining the course of people and nations. Decisions of marriage and journeys, wars and alliances have sometimes been made because special court seers read certain signs of omens from the entrails of a chicken. Many people today are discovering astrology again. Popping up on the newsstands are so many pamphlets and books about the stars that one would almost think it was a new phenomenon. The hippie musical Hair has its own staff astrologer to advise the cast on personal matters and make sure the circumstances are right for business. One of the most popular songs of this moment is Aquarius. Astrology is having the greatest boom in its history. All you have to do is look in almost any newspaper to find out from one of the syndicated stargazers what your forecast is for the day. Columns on the subject now run in 1,220 of the 1,750 dailies in the United States. Writers have taken astrology and applied it to almost everything one can imagine. There is astrology made practical, astrology made easy, astrology for everyday living, astrology guide to health and diet, and even astrology guide to your sex life. A few years ago, Bing Crosby starred in a movie in which one of his songs contained the words, "Have you heard? It's in the stars." There was something prophetic about that song. Astrologers frequently guard their trade by predicting in generalities. However, sometimes they venture beyond vagaries and are explicit in attempting to foretell exact happenings. The result may be acute embarrassment for the astrologer. For instance, in a national publication of 1968, an article was featured that quoted a renowned astrologer in her predictions about the upcoming elections in November of that year. By reading the stars, this astrologer said that Rockefeller would be the next president of the United States, and either Ronald Reagan or John Lindsay would be vice president. As for Hubert Humphrey, she stated, I've studied his chart very carefully, and I do not believe he will be considered as a serious contender, even for the second slot on the Democratic ticket. These political gentlemen may or may not have been disappointed by the outcome of the elections of 1968, but the astrologer was probably a bit chagrined. On prophecy. 200 years ago, a distinguished English statesman, Horace Walpole, said, "The wisest prophets make sure of the events first." Many people would probably dispute that statement and draw attention to some of our famous contemporary prophets. There was Edgar Cayce, for instance, who was called America's sleeping clairvoyant. Cayce spoke of future events while in a self-imposed hypnotic trance. He gave personal readings to guide the vocations and health and personal relationships of hundreds of persons. However, he went beyond individuals and prophesied the reversal in Japan's attitude of friendship for the U.S. before World War II, certain battles which would take place during that war, and the increase in racial tension in America. However, Cayce's special contribution to the realm of psychic phenomena extended beyond mere prophecy. He advised others on how to develop this psychic ability, how to interpret dreams, where to find peace, and many other subjects. His telepathic statements made during this hypnotic sleep state have been indexed, cataloged, and preserved by a special research society in Virginia. Although he has been dead for more than 20 years, when we called the local library to locate some of his books, we were told that they were all checked out, and we would have to be put on a waiting list. What about the popularity of Jean Dixon? Her books and articles have become national bestsellers. She has fascinated and astounded heads of nations with her uncanny skills of perception. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt consulted Miss Dixon at the height of his concern over the world crisis. And plagued by his own ill health, he sought her advice. In the company of other national leaders of the past, Roosevelt sought to find out what the future would be from someone who possessed special, uncanny ability to prophesy. Jean Dixon told President Roosevelt that eventually the U.S. would be allied with Russia against Red China. However, she warned FDR not to give Russia anything that wasn't ours to give. The president, however, evidently did not heed this advice, for it was not long afterward that the Yalta Conference was held and FDR concluded a secret agreement with Russia to give the USSR certain territory which has remained under her domination ever since. Ms. Dixon has made some predictions which have had striking fulfillments. She sent word, it is reported, to the late President Kennedy prior to his trip to Dallas, warning him that he would be killed there. She also predicted several years ago that we would have a Republican president elected in 1968. By her own admission, however, Miss Dixon says she is not infallible. For instance, she predicted that Red China would plunge the world into war over Quemoy and Matsu in October of 1958. If you can't remember that far back, this did not happen. She thought Walter Reuter would actively seek the presidency in 1964. He didn't. High spirits. Spiritualism and mysticism are weaving their spells among all age groups. We saw a handsomely illustrated magazine recently that featured prophecy, ESP news, psychic experiences, and spiritual healing. Provocative advertising included communications from the sun world and a new book which reveals how they live in another dimension that is only an instant away from the rapport with Earth. from rapport with Earth. It is a mystic time. Famous movie stars and wealthy socialites are traveling to the countries of the Far East to consult with holy men. The influence of spiritualism in our popular songs, jewelry, and even clothing is obvious. We received an invitation recently from an Indian spiritualist who says she advises on all affairs of life. She also has a guarantee, money back, to remove the evil influences and bad luck from anyone who consults her. The spirits are running in religious circles also. A famous bishop, now deceased, stimulated interest in psychic phenomena by his communications with his dead son. In churches and on college campuses, mediums are receiving speaking invitations. The writer of a religious column in a Los Angeles paper recently reported suffering from religious persecution and occasions of fakery in the ranks since its beginning in the mid-1800s. The spiritualists' movement in America is gaining new confidence today. In the field of higher education, there are more than 40 colleges which now conduct psychic research under the title of parapsychology. The interest in these subjects is growing in proportion to the increase in astrology and prophecy. C'est la vie. The future is big business. Frenchmen, for instance, spend more than $1 billion a year on clairvoyants, gypsies, faith healers, seers, and prophets. In Paris, there is one charlatan for every 120 Parisians, compared with one doctor for every 514 citizens, and one priest for every 5,000. If you want to hear what the future has in store for you, perhaps you should see your travel agent for the fastest way to France. But try to avoid the need for a doctor or a priest. Their services are rather scarce. Escape. We were on the campus of a large university talking with some students in the comfortable lounge of one of the dormitories when we noticed a very attractive girl hesitate in the doorway. She stood for a few moments, her eyes glancing vacantly around the room, and then darted out as if she were being chased by demons. "What on earth do you think was wrong with her?" I asked my companions. "Probably her vibrations were wrong," answered one of the young men. "She might have thought there was someone or something in here that was a threat. Who knows?" Vibrations, spirits, stars, prophets. What an absorbing interest we have today in the unknown, the unseen, and the future. In our imagination, we long to step out of our humdrum existence and into the worlds beyond. Take science fiction as an example. It fascinates us. We read books from the serious to the comic about men with miraculous powers of vision or perception. We sit with fascination before our television sets as we are transported out of the present and into the tomorrows. Tell it like it will be. In talking with thousands of persons, particularly college students from every background and religious or irreligious upbringing, this writer found that most people want reassurance about the future. For many of them, their hopes, ambitions, and plans are permeated with the subconscious fear that perhaps there will be no future at all for mankind. This is a natural and prevalent attitude. Looking at the world today, it seems to be on a collision course. As the headline expressed in a recent news magazine, "The world in a mess." People are searching for answers to basic questions. It is like the two young men who went into a bookstore and asked for a book on the philosophy of truth. The clerk was flustered and very apologetic. She didn't want to discourage them, but she said they were asking for the impossible. I wish I had been in that bookstore. It would have been so simple to walk over to a rather prominent display and pull out the book that generations of readers have believed contains the philosophy of truth. It not only contains truth, but also the greatest